Okay.
Okay, cool.
So my name is April Tapia. My pronouns are she, her, and I am mixed race. My mother, she was black mainly. There's some other sprinkling of other things in there, but mostly black. And then on my father's side, he is Spanish, Italian, and native to Mexico as well. So even though you know, even though I'm Spanish, I don't really have any Spanish upbringing. I was primarily raised by my mother on my mother's side, and the dynamics just on that side were very interesting in their own way, and just with my mother as well. Um, so I do probably lean more towards generally having a more comfortability with diverse groups, right? Um, and then also just on the black side as well, I was a little bit removed from our family a bit, and that was by my mother's choice. She had her issues with family on that side. So, while I would say, like in my younger years, I did have a heavily more African American influence on my life. In my later years, not so much. Later years, I went to a lot of different schools and just I got to know lots of different types of people and cultures. So,
Nice. Yeah. I'm actually gonna jump down
sure.
then to code switching, if you're cool with that.
Hmm.
Um, so you've had a lot of experience with different cultures. Do you feel comfortable? Has code switching still felt like a part of things or only in specific situations?
Yeah, code switching is probably a daily occurrence, depending on who I'm talking to, honestly. Like, you know, um, you do find for someone like me, you do find that like normally you talk to people uh in a certain way, a very normal way, right? But if I'm hanging out with someone who is also, mixed race with black, or if I talk to someone on the phone who I know is black, there's just that little bit of something that comes out when you're engaging within it. There's a level of like, oh, I get to be a little bit more myself, right? So definitely yes with the code switching.
Yeah. So and then leading on from that, when you're at a dance, have you noticed that you've had to like code switch at dances, or do you feel pretty comfortable? Like, what has your experience been with that in the dance context?
So I find it very interesting for me personally, just because I'm a very like I tend to be pretty observant of people in general. And, in my mind, when I am participating in these things, I am paying attention to a lot of nuance in terms of what it's like dancing with these types of people versus these people, right? Like the people are different, they come from different backgrounds and such, right? And I do find that if I am partnered up with someone who is black, it's a little different. There is a little bit of a difference in terms of it's not comfortability. So it's not that. It's kind of like you read each other a little different is what I get from it. And it sometimes it feels a little bit more relaxed. Whereas I find that maybe if I'm dancing with someone who has been, people who've been in this community a long time, I'm fairly new to it. Um, so, I don't have a whole lot of experience with blues. I did start with swing dancing first, but still there's something that like I still pick up on where some people they're just more structured, even with blues. And there's that part of me that's like, it's not really supposed to be this. It's supposed to be a little bit, it's supposed to be different. And so I have encountered when I have danced with someone who is black, for like, for instance, I get that. I'm like, okay, this is what, yes, this person is like, they're understanding, they're connecting with me in the way with the music, with just their own body language that, and of course for them, it's like for each of us, there's our history within our own body, right? And the way we feel comfortable moving and all that kind of stuff. So, um, definitely, yeah, I would say that I do experience a bit of code switching in terms of like I get it with dance as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna bounce up to the cultural legacy. And like, so the questions there are like, do you feel like cultural legacy is crucial for authentically engaging in the blues? It's a Black American cultural dance, creative dance. Do you feel like people knowing the cultural legacy is crucial?
Yes, I do think it's important. So just with anything, if you travel to another country, I think it's important to understand their culture. I don't think it's fair to go into another person's world per se and then impose your own belief systems and your own structures and your own, whatever that might be into it, right? So I do think that there is a importance to understanding the history of it, the meaning behind it, what it might mean to other people who you don't have that experience, but it might mean something to them specifically, right? So I do think it's important, but not to the point where, how can I say this? Like, it's one thing to understand the history of it, it's another thing to fully appreciate it. And then it's another thing to want to like incorporate it into your understanding, your life, your everything, right? So I feel like there's some layers to it. And it's nice, sure, you go to classes and they talk about the history. Okay, yeah, we want to make sure you understand the history, this and that. um but my question would be to them is like, how do you then incorporate that into yourself? How do you learn how to do that, right? So that's kind of how I think about it.
Oh, that's great because like I have, a section called appreciation versus appropriation, but I think incorporation is that's I might need to add, like
Yeah, yeah,
like make that, add that language in what I'm trying because that is what I'm trying to convey. I was like, okay, so you appreciate it and like
yeah,
you're
right,
not
right. You
but
have to you have to incorporate it as well. I'll just give you like as an aside, like I've been watching a lot of these videos of people doing the Dabke. I think that's what it's called. It's like the Persian dance or, and it's you just it's so much intensity behind it. You know that there's a lot of history behind it. And I've seen people wanting to like learn the dance. And me myself, I was like, I would love to like literally learn the dance so that if I ever had the opportunity to go to one of these weddings, one of these events, that I could participate in it. But at the same time, it's like, no, but I want to really understand it. Like, I want to know the deep history behind it, what it is that people, what does it evoke inside, these people when they do these dances, right? Because I think there is for all of us, depending on just, your history, where you come from, those like historical dances, even like the Irish dance and Sinners, that scene where they were doing that scene to me, I was just like, you know, just the history of the Irish dance and how many people who have come here in America who are of Irish descent, it's just gone. It's just, they don't even think about it. But there's so much history there. And
oh, are we
a
still
lot of times go ahead. Yeah.
well, it froze for a second, but you said there's so much history there. Continue.
Oh yeah, there's just so much history there, and I think we all have that history within us through our descendants, right? Just where we've come from, our ancestors, things that we don't necessarily think too much about, especially here in America. I feel like people just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm American, and that's it, forgetting about where you come from, forgetting about your history, your culture, things like that. So, what was the question again? What were we talking on?
So that question was cultural legacy is crucial for
Cultural
authentically
legacy.
engaging
Yeah.
in the blues.
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
I do think that it's just important to personally as individuals, it's important to try to really understand these things that you want to incorporate in your life and be a part of.
Yeah. So I will come back to sinners, but I'm gonna continue with cultural legacy.
Sure.
Um so have you experienced expectations of what the blues scene standards should be and how to behave that either uphold or maybe undermine Black American cultural standards?
I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say yes. and I'm not afraid to say these things because, you know, I analyze just the differences between, you know, all different, you know, backgrounds, cultures, races, all these things. And like, you know, people do talk about like the whitewashing of things. And so it does, I do find that it feels a little bit whitewashed. It's too structured. And that's the thing. It comes in in the terms of structure. When you try to structure something that came from a need to express, it doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't quite make sense to me. So I do find sometimes that like I just enjoy, even though, like, you know, again, I'm still learning, I'm still like getting into it and kind of like finding my own voice through movement. And so I find that sometimes I just like dancing by myself and to just to give myself the opportunity to explore it. Because sometimes when I'm in partner dance, it does feel a little too structured. It feels like we're just doing these, you know, these steps that we've been told to do, you know, those type of things. When I do feel it is more of a um, you know, an opportunity to play in dance, right? You're listening to the music, you're feeling it, you let the whatever whatever it comes out of you, right? And I have had some really amazing dances where I've gotten to experience that. And I'm like, yes, I need more of that. I need more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, because all these dances, they were, you know, they were hearing the music and then they're like, "This is what it makes me feel like. This is how, you know, this is how it's impacting me." And then later people are like, "Oh, how do we recreate that?" And it's like, I think often the element of like, "Well, how are you feeling?" You know, can get lost.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which I get because you know, you do watch a lot of those like the old videos of people dancing and you know, people want to they like the styling that someone had. They like the footwork that that person used. They like the way they did this little dip and that little whatever, right? And so I get wanting to incorporate those things into the dances, into like their own, you know, like when I'm doing blues, I want to I like these types of moves, you know. I totally get it. I totally get it. But I think there does need to be a little bit more room for complete vulnerable exploration with blues dancing.
Yeah, I'm gonna lead into the last thing listed of sensuality as opposed to like sexuality or hypersexualization. Like
Mm.
Black individuals tend to be super hypersexualized or even like adultified from a young age. And so, is there anything you like to share in distinguishing sensuality from sexualization when it comes to movement, dancing? Or doesn't even have to be about sexualization, it could be about this like vulnerability, right? Like this so yeah, anything you'd like to like share insight on that kind of element?
I don't really have too much thoughts on that.
Okay.
You know, because again, like because everyone's different. You know, some just talking about women in general, right? Some women tend to carry themselves in a way that might be perceived as more sexual, right? They just they're the way they sway, their confidence, they're this and that, right? Um and I think that when it comes to dancing, especially something like blues, I think there shouldn't really be any limitation on the ability to express it. If you are a person who feels like I am a sexy goddess, whatever, right? You should be able to express that. And I don't find that it's been an issue. I haven't really experienced any sort of like anyone really behaving in a way that would deter that. You know what I mean? So I don't have too much to say on that.
Okay, let me kind of let me go to the, like the whitewashing, the
Sure.
colonized, like and the vulnerability. So let's maybe put it more in that. It's like, any thoughts on like um the way like our social culture and maybe what inhibits vulnerability, or like how people could use dance to find more vulnerability, something like that.
That's a good question. I mean, it is twofold. It does, it is part of it. It's with yourself, your own comfortability with yourself, right? But again, this is an opportunity to learn how to express that. And I think that, if you're dancing with a partner that also makes you feel comfortable, that's a huge thing, right? That's a huge part of it in terms of, is this someone who I feel like is not judging me while I'm dancing? Or is it someone who's not specifically trying to lead me to do specific moves, things like that, right? So I think as long as everybody has the freedom and the trust there with their partner, it gives them the opportunity to kind of find that.
Yeah, and so I guess so this could be a question that you don't have an answer to, but like, do you have any thoughts on like how to build the trust without making it so structured? Like, is there any thoughts on like, I hear you on this, like it's so structured. Um, so is there any thoughts on like how to build trust if it's so like free reign kind of thing? I don't know how to say it. Like, do you understand what I'm asking? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Um, no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, honestly, like how sometimes it just depends. Like you just might meet someone, dance with someone who the vibe is just a bit different, you know? So it's really hard to say, like, how do you implement a thing that should just sort of naturally occur, right? You have to kind of like build it up within yourself, and then you hope that you meet somebody, you're dancing with somebody that also like allows you to feel comfortable as well, right? So it's really hard to say. Um, and I think maybe, let's say if you are a teacher, you're teaching blues, that you kind of learn to open it up a little bit more. Like as structured as it may be, we've got to have opportunity to like play more. I think that's part of it. It's just giving everyone an opportunity to just sort of play around a bit. Um, and that might be like I do like the times when in classes where they're like, oh, just do whatever you feel. We're just gonna go in a circle and just and do whatever you feel type of thing, right? So sometimes there's things like that, but even sometimes in the do whatever you feel, they're like, okay, but while doing these specific steps, right? So I just think that you got to give people the opportunity to really explore their own body and their own movement and what they feel comfortable with.
yeah. I like what this is like. I'm gonna say some things that like kind of popped out to me. I think one thing is like the resonating with somebody. It sounds like trying to find the people you resonate with, and then more for like the teaching aspect is like this. Hey, like we're here to learn. Let's and mistakes are part of learning, but we're not saying it's like so there is no judgment, like kind of thing, and um we're here to explore. Like, so I could, yeah, so that's what kind of was like popping out to me of like giving that, um, we're coming with intention. Maybe intention is an element to this,
Mhm.
like intention of I want to dance this, intention of I want to connect with my partner. Maybe intention is something that,
Right,
and if you don't click, then not that there's anything bad. It's just that our intentions aren't aligned. Like,
right.
kind of. Yeah. I'm gonna go real quick to this nostalgia question.
Sure.
A lot of dancers come to swing and blues for like, oh, the good old days, that golden era, and um, didn't really exist for people of color, Black Americans. So like, it doesn't necessarily nostalgia doesn't have to be specifically that, but like, do you have nostalgia? Like, does nostalgia come into play at all for you when participating in blues? Like, what did it? does it come into play why you gravitated towards it or not?
No, I wouldn't say nostalgia. It was honestly like because I always wanted to learn swing. I knew that for a long time. I liked, the Gene Kelly movies and all that kind of stuff. I tap danced and things, and I just like I liked that idea of learning how to swing dance. And so when I got into it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is super fun. Like I've always wanted to do it. But like when I walked into the blues room and just like the music and everything and the vibe, and I was like, I don't know, it just like pulled on me a bit, and it's not something that I could really understand or describe because there's nothing really, you know, for me and my history that I would say this was ever like an element or a thing, you know what I mean? But there was just something about it that really attracted me to it. Um And sometimes I think that's just, that's things that are embedded in us that we don't really quite understand, but it's just like it's a part of us from our history, whatever that may mean, right? And so like when people, they talk about nostalgia and they want to, they think about the early 1900s and all that kind of stuff. And uh I yes, it is. I know it is a bit different of a visual for white versus black in America, but I think even for black people, they Black people tend to be pretty have historically been very resilient, and so even knowing what those times were for Black people, there was still some level of like, but we still found our way, we still made our way, we still did our thing, we still found opportunities to have joy, right? So
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna bounce up to this. Do you remember the first time you heard blues music? And it may be different than the first time, so just talked about when you found the blues room, but like, did you ever, were you ever exposed to blues music, earlier in your life, or maybe not?
not really. I mean, probably a little bit here and there through movies. You could even say that even going to, because I was raised both Catholic and Christian. When I was my aunt, she raised me for some years, and so I used to go with her to church, right? And so it was a black church. It's all the music and the singing and the joy and the this and the that, versus Catholic church was very like, it was the hymns and kneeling and sitting and kneeling, very different. But I think just like the music has so much depth to it that's it's there's something about that, and yeah, my aunt, she used to listen to different artists and stuff like that. And it's not necessarily blues music, but like you can think about like Mary J. Blige, right? And her music, it evokes things inside you, those feelings and such. And so um I would say in little ways, but not directly blues music, no.
Yeah, so that, yeah, that flows right into the next part of the question of like, so in comparison, blues in comparison to like its technical like descendants, whether directly or indirectly, of like R&B, soul, even hip hop. So is there anything like, do you resonate more with a maybe different music that has kind of come from the blues? Or how do you feel like it compare? You just talked about how evoking feeling. So is there anything else you'd like to say on that, or is that pretty good?
I mean, just in comparison, it's funny because like when I dance with someone to a Prince song, okay, like I can't remember which song it was specifically, but it's one of the slower songs. It's a song that I really really like, and I was just like, man, like this is like, ooh, I was like really getting into it. I was like blues dancing to this, like, oh, this is like sending me, it's sending me. And I think, yeah, there are some other songs that I've heard that are like, there's one song by this guy. Um, he's actually him and his buddy are like YouTubers. They've been doing YouTube for a long time, but he started his own music thing on the side, and it's so quasi country something or other. But he has this one song, and I was like, every time I hear it, I'm like, I just want to I want to blues dance to this song. Just the words, the music, the emotion behind it. It just it's so good to me. It's called it's by James and the Shame,
Hmm.
and it's called To Kill a Man. Okay. And the lyrics are more like, it's kind of a song almost. But he's
Sorry,
got
cut
this
out. Say it one more time. It's kind of a
it's
what?
kind it's kind of like a folk song, like the words and everything that what he's singing. And then you've got like that country twang to it. And it's a really fun song that I feel like, but he's got a lot of like emotion behind it, I feel like. And so I really like, I'm just like, I love it. I love it. And I think it would fit perfectly into blues, even though it's not technically blues music. So there are lots of songs, I think, that there are a lot of, artists and songs that you could, they kind of lean into blues, even though they aren't technically blues music, right? And even like people talk about like emo music being like blues. You know what I mean? So
It is emotional music.
yeah.
So yeah, so then real quick, this is where I'm gonna bring it back to Sinners. What did you think about that scene where he's calling the ancestors and the descendants, and you just like connecting everybody, future and past?
Oh, it gave me goosebumps. It was so beautiful. And then it just made so much sense. It just like something clicked, I think, in like everybody's brain. And they're like, "Oh, I get it now. I get it now." It's like even though the music that we're making is what it is now, there's still so much in from so much of our history. There's so much that has transcended through time to get us to where we are now in terms of the music that's being made, right? And the music that we appreciate. And I thought that scene was so beautifully well done, and it really touched on the the human desire, the human need, the human drive to just express, to create, to whatever that is, in dance and song and art and all of it, right? It's just the human desire, the human need to poetry, right? Just to express those deeply complex things that we experience in our lives,
Yeah, and like and not denying parts of ourselves, but like fully embracing, right?
right?
Did you have any thoughts at all about the breakdancing at the 2024 Olympics last year? It's okay if you don't. I'm just curious.
Well, all I can remember is the one lady who literally didn't know how to break dance. Like that was like
Mhm.
the main thing that everybody was talking about. She, she didn't know what she was doing. I don't know how she got there, but she got there somehow. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, you'll be able to compete, no problem," right? Like, have they seen other break dancers? I don't know. I don't know. That was very strange to me. I didn't mind the break dancing Olympics part of it, but um in terms of thinking that you were as good as the people who just do it for funsies on the streets, you know what I mean? That's where it's like, what happened? What happened? Who was thinking this made sense?
Yeah, that kind of wraps back to like the appropriation, like colonization, the whitewashing of like we it's ours now. Like we like it, we want it.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I'm gonna bounce real quick up to this like when growing up or even like so more so growing up was athleticism emphasized as a practice or value from Black members of your family at all, or
Not for me. Not for me.
yeah,
Um, but uh it's interesting because like where I grew up, part of it too, so I grew up in Sun Valley part of my life, and I lived on a block where there were all sorts of kids from everywhere, and all of us used to be outside every day playing till the sun went down, the street lights came on, and then when the street lights came on, you were supposed to go inside the house, type of thing, right? It was like literally that, where parents didn't know where you were just out there, whatever. Um, and there was never, none of the kids were in sports. None of the kids were like, oh yeah, well, except for two of my cousins, they were in baseball, but like it was kind of just nobody really cared to push you towards anything athletic. If you wanted to, okay. But there was no emphasis on it really. But kids found ways to express their own athleticism because they felt like it. So everyone was outside doing cartwheels and backflips and jumping off of buildings, doing backflips. And we just did things. We just did things. So it wasn't something that was like encouraged or discouraged in my upbringing whatsoever.
gotcha. And so, okay, you mentioned tap. I want to, and we've talked about before that you used to teach tap. Like, was there anything that drew you to that? Did it feel like an outlet for like energy, or was it more of a creative expression?
Part of it was I wanted to get into something that kept me active, and then also tap dancing was also something else I wanted to do, like Gene Kelly again, like all those old-timey movies and stuff, and watching them tap dance and do all these fun dances and things. That it was just something that I wanted to do, and Pierce College at the time had a class that was on a weekend that I could attend, and the price for the classes was great and all that, so I just did it. And I did it for like 6 years under the tap teacher there until she passed away. And then after that, I taught for, off and on for like a year. I taught at some studio I was renting, but um it was just, again, it was just one of those things that like I always wanted to do. I was fascinated by it. It looked really fun. And even with tap dancing, so here's the thing. Uh my teacher, Emily Main, she was very theatrical. Her upbringing was like she knew how to do like the Indian dances, all those kinds of things. She traveled the world. She learned all sorts of dances, but she was very theatrical. So what I really enjoyed from learning from her was that additional expression of body, right? It wasn't just I'm just moving my feet to the specific, beat. I'm doing this, I'm dancing, I'm blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Um, a lot of tap dancers now, like the very popular ones like Sarah Reich and Chloe Arnold, they do a lot of the syncopated type of dances. So it's very much about the rhythm, specifically the rhythm. But I find that there's very little expression of dance with what they do. And so I'm more into like you do watch those old timey movies where they were dancing. They were full on dancing while tap dancing. And that's something that I'm more drawn to, is the creative expression of body as well with tap.
Nice, yeah. So you mentioned Gene Kelly. Do you remember when you might have been ever exposed to, like, the Nicholas Brothers? Any, like, more like, were you ever really exposed to, like, black tap dancers at all? Either before or after starting tap?
Probably after more so. Because I think like when I was a kid too, my grandma, she used to watch like a lot of old timey movies, and I would just sit there and see things. And so there was all those little things that just got embedded in my brain. And then as I got older, I was like, oh yeah, I really like that. I want to learn more about that. So
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So I have a question about tokenization. So it may not, since you're newer to the blues scene, it may not be in blues, but have you felt like tokenized maybe in tap, or tokenized just in other things, maybe not even dance? Like, have you ever experienced a tokenization element?
Not so much for me, and that's mostly because people they can't figure me out sometimes. They see me and they're like, "What is she?" They don't know they don't know what box to put me in. That's been like the thing majority of my life. People just don't know where to fit me in so they can, you know. And so I haven't really had those experiences, no.
Okay, and then I'm gonna riff off of that. Um, kind of it may be to the same tone of people not knowing what to make of you, like who are you? But like, have you experienced any rejection or like avoidance or like microaggressions in dance as someone who is you know you are a person of color at the very least, they can perceive that probably. Have you noticed anybody like avoiding you or things like that? Because a lot of Black women have said, like, "I can get dances," like.
Yeah. No, yes, I have. And sometimes I try to figure out why. I'm just like, yeah, I've definitely had where like some people specifically like they will not dance with me. I even like they won't approach me. And then I have like approached them to ask them for a dance and they've given me some excuse. So I'm like, and I'm trying to figure out like why doesn't this person want to dance with me? I don't know. Microaggressions, yes, I have encountered some microaggressions. And but you know, usually I don't, think they don't I don't let them bother me, because I'm used to it. I've gotten it a lot throughout my life just from and all sorts of people, just sorts of backgrounds of people and cultures and races and all that kind of stuff. They just like it when they find out that I'm part black. I have experienced that when they find out that I'm part black, they're a little weird and I don't know why, what, but I know that that's what the world is. And so, um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then one question I definitely wanna make sure to cover is, like, matriarchy. So, like, I know you said you could tell you lived with your aunt, you've also mentioned your grandma, like, some people I've talked to have said, that Black American is more of a matriarchal culture. Have you experienced that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
It is. It definitely is. Um, I don't have too much to expand on it, but yeah, it definitely is.
And so one thing I haven't had a chance yet to officially interview this person, but one of the like teachers, his name is Damon Stone, he's mentioned like, oh, the reason why the follows have and blues have a a voice as much as the lead is because of this more like equal, like viewing women as equals and viewing follows aren't always women, but if that is the feminine role, feminine and the masculine are equal. And so I'm curious, like, if you compare blues to Lindy, do you feel like there's any kind of do you feel like you get to express more in blues? Like you're as opposed to being like dictate because we talked about the structure. Do you feel
Mhm.
like there's a noticeable difference between Lindy and blues when it comes to a lead and follow partnership?
Uh, there is. And for me, I feel like it's a funny experience because I am typically a person that like so I will back lead. People talk about back leading when doing swing. Um, so but that just comes from my personality. Like I am somebody who's like I do like to take the lot of things. I do like to take control sometimes. And so like when you're swing dancing, it's like, okay, let me relinquish and let me let this person, do do the lead the dance. So also I think why I do like with blues because there is sort of a like give and take of control over who is leading at what time. um it's funny, I think like sometimes I might dance with a female lead and I feel like the dynamics there are very interesting to me because it's like when they're leading, but then I try to lead. We're doing this little game, this little push game of like wait, who's leading now? So I don't know. It's interesting. I do like it. I do like that blues is a little more give and take in that way though.
And, I realized I don't have this question on my thing, I should probably add it, is like, do you consider yourself a follow? Do you consider like, have you ever tried to lead? Is that something that interests you, in blues, specifically? Or
Yeah,
do you feel like
so
it's
yeah, I tend to like to follow, but I have been the lead couple times. And sometimes usually I'll be the lead with someone who is newer than me. Um, I do like I do like that because you give somebody opportunity to kind of like they're learning the dance with somebody who's going to be more direct with them and say, okay, like loosen your body, loosen your hips a little bit, try this, try that. So I'm like in their ear, like trying to like guide them a little bit. And they're like this. And I'm like, yeah, 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 that's better. That's better. Like now you're more relaxed, you're less bouncy, or, like little things like that. And then they're usually pretty appreciative of it, I find, which is nice. So I follow, but I will lead if I feel like it's somebody who could use a little extra, like a little help and loosening up a little bit.
yeah, because it sounds like you're encouraging them, like, "Yeah, yeah, that's the thing," like, "Lean into
Yeah.
that," kinda stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, let me see. I feel like we've covered, like, the hardcore questions, but there's so much things you said that I'm, like, trying to be like, "Oh, I wanna, like, expand on things you said." So I'm trying to, like, go back in my brain. Um, Here's one thing that I, like, apply like, this came up when started interviewing people, like, different perceptions of what is polite. Have you
Mm.
like and you said you observe a lot, so I'm just curious, like, have you observed this at social dance of the, like, people trying to be polite, but maybe they don't match up? Um,
Yeah. Um, yeah. And I think there's nothing too strange about it. I think because sometimes people are just like they're not sure um they want to make sure that other people are comfortable. They're not sure what the like ground rules are yet. And so, some of them will be a little more like, they might hold on to a little like loose, and kind of away, and they're not really sure, and um, and so I think communication with them is important because you just want to let them know, like, hey, like I'm comfortable. Are you comfortable? Like this is okay. If you want to hold me a little closer, that's okay. If those types of things. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything too strange about it. I think it's just human nature, and people want, they're in close proximity with somebody they don't even know, and so they're just like, I don't want to do anything that makes this person feel uncomfortable.
yeah. Yeah, so that's part of what I'm trying to do with these is like this cross cultural of like, okay, where like how can we find ways to like where nobody is being drained, like where the burden is not on someone to like change how they behave um extremely to make someone else, like how do we find this middle ground of um coming from all different cultures and participating in this dance that is from a specific culture,
Yeah.
but it's kind of now not divorced, but like as you will probably agree, like when you go to dances, there is mostly white or mostly, it's not very low numbers of black people come out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
Yeah.
there's any thoughts I mean, that's not a question, but like I don't like feel free to go if you have any
Yeah,
thoughts on this as someone who observes a lot. Like
I
just curious.
do.
I'd love to hear it. Go.
Yeah, no, I do have a lot of thoughts in that. So personally for me, when I show up to dances, now I've also been traveling and I have plans to do more traveling. And part of that traveling is finding places to go dance as well, right? So I'm gonna go to the one in Philly in October. It's October, right? Yeah, in
Yeah.
October. And this is my personal experience, the way I feel when I walk into these spaces. I walk into a place where there's some blues dancing going on, and if I see one black person, I'm like, "Oh, a black person." I swear to God, it's just kind of like because it's surprising. It's like surprising to see a black person at these dances, at these events, and it is a little weird for me, like because I'm like culturally, this is Black American dance. This is originating from here, from Black America, and where are they? I keep asking that question. Where are they? Where are all the Black dancers? Even when I went to New Orleans, and apparently their dance scene has dwindled a lot just after COVID and everything. And so the one place I went to, majority of people there were white. There were very few Black people. There were a couple other people of like different backgrounds, but even that experience, I found that like most of those people, they show up with their friends and they just dance with each other, and that's it, right? Even here, I'll find that certain places I show up to, people show up with their friends, they just dance with each other. They don't really ask anyone else to dance or anything like that. So sometimes it can be hard to get a dance. Um, but yeah, like I'm kind of like personally feeling like I'm on a mission to figure out where all the Black blues dancers are now. I swear to God, like personally, that's just how I'm kind of viewing it.
I think you're gonna be happy with Blues Muse in Philly because there are a lot of Black dancers, both because Philly like has a lot of a Black population, but just people who travel. I'm
Right.
excited. I'm definitely gonna be like asking. I mean, not as part of this, but like, what'd you think? What'd you think? Like, was that what
Yeah, yeah,
because I think that is the thing when you travel, because most events people are also traveling, so the ratio is a little bit better at national events because the odds of people also kind of seeking out like I love this and I want to find other people who really incorporate it, who get it. The odds are better when you're able to all
right.
um meet up at together outside of your individual scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
do
that'll
I
be.
do wonder if part of it is that, I'm wondering if Black people do feel a bit excluded from a lot of these groups, a lot of these places, if they just don't feel as like welcomed or what it is, you know what I mean? I do I am like in conversation with a group of Black women who are mostly swing dancers. And anytime I have brought up blues to them, they kind of get this like put off vibe. And I don't really know. I might have to like explore it myself and just find out like what's the deal with that. But it does seem that these spaces, a lot of the people who are teaching blues and things like that, they're not of African American descent. So I'm thinking that a lot of Black people might feel just excluded in general.
And then, well, and that's also why. So I think there's that, but and there's also the tokenization. I've been around for 13 years for blues, and I've seen where people like a Black person, you're doing, you're our teacher, you're our DJ, you're our, and then they're like, oh, I'm just used. Like, I'm here to make you, to legitimize you, and now you've completely drained me of everything. Like, that's not what I
Right,
want.
right.
So I'm glad. I mean, like in some way, I'm glad that's not happening to you because I think that's the thing is like when people are able to put people in boxes, then they can lead to this, well,
Mhm.
this is your use to me kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, here's one thing that I'm just curious. This is something that I would like to see more is like this like vocal encouragement. Like while whether it's directly to your partner or if you see someone else or if there's a jam. Did like so I know that is a value like or like if you get into Black spaces, people are not afraid to be vocal and like support.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
is that correct to assume that you have experienced that throughout your life? And then what are your thoughts about that, like being incorporated into the dance scene?
Ask the question one more time.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on like vocal encouragement, like vocal engagement with others at like a blues dance scene?
You just mean for me personally, like
Like, do you think that there is a place for it? Do you think do you is that something that um would help it feel a little bit more like not being, appropriative, but like if people truly understand what it like that it's okay to do this and that it's
Mhm.
an element of Black culture, do you think there's a place for it in like a blues scene or
for vocal encouragement.
Yeah. Like not kind of going back to the politeness of like not being so like, oh, I cannot comment on someone else. Like that like, hey, I said I like
Um,
it.
no, I think it's good. I do. I think if you're a person who can give encouragement without being weirdly judgy, um, because I'm the type of person to encourage other people. I'm the type of person that's going to be vocal and I'm going to say, oh, hey, like, let's, you know, there's this one thing that you're doing, like, let's have you try this type of thing, right? Like, so I'll do that with a partner just to like help kind of guide them a little bit. And I think that that's okay. I have had experience of like someone rudely correcting me, but that was in swing dance. Yeah, that was in swing dance. And it's like I don't know all the moves because there's a lot of like very like outside the normal box moves or whatever that people might try to do with you. And it's like I don't know this move yet, so I don't know how you're trying to turn me. I don't know what this is. And so I had one person, he basically like scolded me on the dance floor. It's just like I was just like, okay, buddy, like you're taking this like way too seriously, you know. So yes, I do think there is a place for it. I do think that you can do it. You know, especially when you're one on one with somebody, I think that it's okay to, you know, if you want to get like help give someone guidance, I think it's helpful, you know. I mean, especially when someone's just learning, they're new. You know, they're not even sure that what they're doing is quote unquote right? So yes, I do think that vocal encouragement it should be welcomed in these spaces.
Nice. Yeah. But I think that that's some of the things where it's like so divorced, like people don't realize like or it's, yeah, it's become so I keep saying divorced because it's not completely divorced because people will travel and learn from black teachers, but then like trying to bring that back and you're like, I'm not black, you know, and like how do I, you know,
Mm,
pass on these values? But that's the other thing, even if so this is I'm gonna speak a little bit to like from as I've been observing, as I've started interviewing, it's like, okay, what would help make a place be more welcoming to the originators of this dance, and then and how to avoid then being like, here now, like, um, now it's your,
yeah,
you know, you take on all the burden. So it's like finding that balance of like, um, those who are not black but have been able to appreciate and incorporate and help pass that along while also not speaking over, right? Like either not speaking over or objectifying and using people, you know? So I don't know, like we'll see if I can, you know, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or not, but
yeah.
like that's kind of
I
we'll see what comes out of this. Like
I think you know what. Honestly, there just has to be a way to because here's the thing, especially right now with the dynamics in America, all this stuff, right? I mean, Black people right now are kind of just like, you know what? We're just gonna stay over here and just mind our business and just mind and we're not trying to get involved in all this crazy. We're just not. Black people don't feel as welcome in white spaces. That's just what it is. That's just what it is. Even for me as someone who is mixed, I don't always feel very comfortable in spaces that are predominantly white. If there's no one else there that is, you know, from somewhere else, I feel a little bit like, you know, that it just kind of is because you don't really. it- It's sad to say, but the reality of the situation is that when you're black or brown person encountering white people in the world, you just don't know what type of white person you're encountering. You just don't know, right? So the question is, how do you get, how do you get black people to feel comfortable coming into to spaces that are predominantly white now? That is the question, right? And I've seen that, I think that there are probably people out there who they would love to. And I think probably part of it, is location. I think that if you're doing these events in locations that are more diverse, there's plenty of different people around. I think that you could get more people, more diverse groups involved, right? But if you're like, you know, primarily holding these events in places where it's predominantly, mostly white people are always showing up at these different, cities, areas, whatever, it might be a little bit harder. I think part of it is probably going to be location. And then just trying to reach the Black community, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, through other dancers who are dance teachers or whatever, who primarily are teaching, they're Black teachers and they're teaching these different types of dances over here, extending an invitation, say, hey, like, we're doing a blues event, we would love to have like more people from this community come to these events. So that's just my thought on it.
Yeah, and one thing I've heard, not necessarily directly connected to this, but that it was something that got brought up about like most like especially weekly dances, but like most like social dances happen at Masonic lodges or previous
Mhm.
like very like they weren't the clan, right? That's not that, but there's still a like almost a eugenicist, like only very specific people are allowed to be a part of this.
Right,
And now it's not so strong, but they are still maintaining that name, out, moose lodges, things like that. It's like, oh yeah, all of our dances happen at some kind of membership lodge.
right,
Oh, and then but then I would say like comparatively, I'm Idle Hour where Brother Yusuf plays. I feel like that might be one of the spaces where you see a lot of people who like come with. I'm bringing people I know, and because I know them, and this is not a ballroom. It is not a social dance venue. I don't know if
right,
like I'm only gonna dance with the people I brought because like I do know that they can dance, and whether it's this I don't want to try asking other people to dance because I don't know if they can or not. But that's the thing. It's like you can see like if someone else dances, then you can see it. But then what leads some they still won't go. Oh, I know you can dance, but I don't want to ask you to dance because I'm gonna stick with those I know. Stick with the known. So yeah, I think it's interesting because there are a lot of bars with live music around here, but like it's not always Black musicians. But then when it is a Black musician, other people that are showing up like actually feeling that they can, feeling in community, or are they feeling like this is a thing I do with the people I bring, like, and then I go home and that's it. I'm not
right,
trying to
right.
make new friends, you know. So I don't know if that sparks any thought or not, but
No, absolutely. I think that's part of it. I think location, because you got to think about where these people are going to feel most comfortable showing up to. Um and yeah, so I mean some place like the ballrooms in Pasadena, like, that's probably not really their vibe. And also, um even if they're not completely into full on blues music, but even incorporating some of that other, like hip hop and R&B and things like that, it might intrigue them more, type of thing. But um yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it. It's just it's got to be places where they can feel included.
yeah, that makes sense. I know like so Embrace is new, and I know I don't think you've been able to make all of them, but like that's why I think what we're trying to do with Embrace is like, okay, like it is blues and beyond. Like, and actually, I'm gonna be like, send me that song that you mentioned, so that then, because we're actually building a collaborative playlist for this upcoming one in I guess a week from today. So I can add it to the Spotify playlist that Elena is pulling. Like, she wants it to be a collaborative. So I'm like, send it to me. This is the perfect timing that you brought it up because there's a very strong chance it could get played at the next Embrace.
Yeah.
Because we're doing it this way where we're trying to be like, yes, blues and like and beyond, like, and here are the these other genres are inspired by or spun off of or a direct descendant from
Right,
and
right.
trying to expose people to this like, yes, we love blues. Did you know you can also do this to other things? Like, did you know that there's other African or Black culture musical that it's as well? It's like Yeah, so that's not to pat ourselves on the back, but we're like, I think it's like, yeah, something different needs to happen kind of thing. It's like, trying to like navigate, like, okay, what else? Like, how can we make it more inclusive, right? Like, how can we not
Right.
be so structured? Stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to? I can scroll through these real quick if anything to see if anything pops a thought, but you gave me a lot, so if we cut here, we're good, but I don't know if there's anything else that maybe, like, sparks a thought.
No, I think that's pretty much it for me. I mean, we covered a lot. So, I mean, everything that, I've just been thinking about just on my own, I think I've pretty much expressed it. So, so yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.